Hey yo, what's poppin'? Drip TCG in this bitch, and today I am very excited to show y'all my 60 card Code Talker IBLEE Lock Extra Link Cyberspile the deck. So this is a deck that I've been messing around with since Cyberstorm Access dropped and gave us that new support, and I made a video back then showing off some basic combos and a sample list. And this is just an update as to how I'm playing the deck right now, and a little bit more of deck theory now that I've fleshed out some cards. So yeah, let's get to it. The first half of the video is basically going to be deck theory and what the ratios and why I'm playing every card and what they do, etc. The second half is going to be combos, how to actually play the deck. So feel free to jump to whatever part you feel will give the information that you're looking for. Also, before I forget, if you're wondering who I am and whether or not you should be taking advice from me, the answer is no. You shouldn't be taking advice from me because I'm bad at this game. Disclaimer aside, moving on. So this is what the standard Endboard looks like, although the monsters might be rearranged a little bit depending on the combo line and if you got hand trapped. But basically here you have an IBLEE lock with an extra link, meaning they can't special summon. And of course you have Sanctuary to make sure that they can't actually crash the IBLEE. You have triple bounce here, because you have 3 different card typings in the grave to make sure that whatever they normal summon can't beat over one of your 2 monsters in the EMZ, so your extra link doesn't get broken. And just for good measure, we have 3 monster negates on Dark Fluid, a Swan Trap negate over here, and an Omni negate over here. This is obviously needed, in my opinion, to beat out silly things like Dark Ruler and even Triple T, because obviously those 2 cards are cards that can break your board. And it's already come up where people open multiples, for example, Dark Ruler or Triple T, and having this broken card helps with dealing with that situation. So you're pseudo FTKing your opponent because, again, no combo deck can play through this unless you open very specifically. And even if you're going against a trap deck, there's not much they can do, because even if they set 5, you bounce 3 of them in the end phase with Singularity, and then the remaining 2 traps can be negated with Lingaribo and Disavworm. So realistically, no deck is playing through this full board, again, unless they open very specifically. Obviously, some of you know Droplets is a very specific card because they contribute this for cost without having to use up their normal summon, because another way to break the lock is just tributing over this for like a level 5 or level 6. So Droplet isn't right now too much in the format because of reasons we will not mention. But when it is again in the format, then you have to deal with that. But still, a very hard board to crack, even regardless of IBLEE being there or not. So I wanted to talk about this real quick so that the rest of the profile actually makes sense, so that you at least know what the deck is aiming to do, what's the end board, what's the end goal. So one of the first questions many people might correctly ask is this consistent, right? Because this is a 60 card deck, and the answer is yes. Yes, this is actually very consistent. To be specific, there's about an 80% chance that any given hand will end on that full board, the whole extra link IBLEE lock with a billion negates. And to give you a comparison, if this were like a 40 or 42, 44 card version of the deck, it would be a little bit more consistent, because if this were 40 cards, it would be like a 90 to 91% chance that any hand can do that full combo. So while yes, this 60 card version is less consistent than if it were like 40 or 42 cards, it is still not inconsistent by any means, right? 80% chance is still very consistent. And that other 20% of the time, it's not like you brick. It's just that you end on a smaller board. So yes, despite being a 60 card deck, it is very consistent. And of course, you can brick, but I mean, that's something that's going to happen with any deck, regardless of deck count or what, archetype you're playing. Now, I'll admit this because I'm the one who made the deck. This deck is shamelessly, unapologetically trying to win the die roll and go first and pseudo FTK your opponent, right? And I want to point that out because, technically, you shouldn't make a deck like that, right? You should make your main deck to be able to just as easily go first as it can go second, because obviously you're not always going to win the die roll. It's a 50-50 every time. And I do have a couple hand traps in here to help with going second, but do keep in mind this deck is shamelessly made for being better going first. than it is at being able to go second. Although still, obviously, it's a Cybers deck. You have, tools, access code, like any two Cybers monsters is access code, and there's a couple other stuff you can do. Another question I've seen regarding this kind of build is why would you bother making so many interruptions, like with the Dark Flowing having 3 negates, searching the counter trap, ending on original Firewall when Singularity already does the same thing, etc., etc. Why end on so many interruptions when just the IBLEE lock plus extra link alone beats a lot of decks, and maybe that plus 1 or 2 extra things beats most decks? So there's a couple reasons. The first one, although in no particular order, but one of them is that the IBLEE lock isn't unbeatable, right? For starters, obviously, you're going to get hand trapped in many of your games, and many times, depending on when and where they hand trap, that might stop you from being able to IBLEE lock. So actually having the option to make the Dark Fluid with the counters, to end on both of the Firewalls that bounce, to end up with the Fusion Engrave, etc., etc. Having all of those options helps to when you can't establish the IBLEE lock, or even nowadays, let's say your opponent top decks a Bestial, they can tribute over IBLEE. If you're going against Manatium, they can search Visa Starfrost, tribute over IBLEE, etc., etc. So that's one of the reasons, is that the IBLEE lock doesn't always stay. But the bigger reason, I would say, is just that ending on that full board is basically free, in the sense that every single main combo in this deck is like a 1.5 or 2 card combo. Like, there's no actual 3 card combos in this deck, and you don't need any specific 2 cards to make the full board. And what I mean is that there's many different 2 card combinations that can get you to the full board. And in that regard, it's not like, again, you don't have to open like a specific 3 card hand or a specific 2 card hand. It's not like it costs 4 cards in my hand or my entire hand to make the combo. It's very resource efficient in terms of hand advantage. And obviously, if they hand trap you, then that's when you're gonna need extenders to be able to play through that. But the point I'm trying to say is ending on that full board is relatively free, in terms of it not costing you hand advantage, and it not costing you or relying on having to open some specific cards, because everything is highly searchable in this deck and it's very redundant. Now, the one thing that my Endboard does cost me is extra deck space, right? Because basically 13 of the 15 cards in my extra deck are dedicated to that combo. But what that means is that, for example, this list isn't playing cards like Almirage, Salaman Grade Almirage, which I'd like to play, Decode Talker Heat Soul, which I'd like to play, Update Jammer, which I'd like to play, or Link Spider and Crystal Heart, what's her name, which I would also like to play for Nibiru. So those 5 cards in that exact order, from most important to least, I really would like to play them. But again, I only have 2 flex spots in my extra deck, so I really haven't been able to fit them in. So that is something I'm sacrificing. But you know what? I don't care. Because when you do get to do the full combo, it is so fun. And so funny. Because sometimes people try to break the board. Or like I said, some specific times people will like tribute over IBLEE, and then try to actually play out their turn. But it's just so many interruptions. It's extremely hard for somebody to break the full board. So onto the actual card by card. I have my deck split up by function, as in by what each card does. So for example, these are my starters / pseudo starters, extenders, hand traps, and engine requirements. This is basically how I organize my decks usually on Edo Pro, because it makes it easier, at least for me, when I'm like trying to figure out what to add in or what to take out. It's easier for me when I already have my deck organized like that, because that way I know what each card is doing in the deck, so it's easier to tinker around with ratios. So I figured I'd also do that for the video. So starting off with my starters or pseudo starters, we have 1 copy of Cynet Codec. So obviously Cynet Codec is the card that actually helps you make the full board, and it's cracked. But I used to be playing this at 3 when the support first dropped back in Cyberstorm Axis. But I realized eventually that it just wasn't a good card as a 3-of. Like, sure, sometimes having it versus not having it makes a difference between actually doing the full combo and not doing the full combo. And again, if you do the full combo, you should essentially win the game. But what ended up happening is that I noticed the sad reality that this card is only good in your hand when the rest of your hand is already good. Because this card depends on you being able to stick 2 Cyber's bodies on the field. And while going first, that is a little bit more easy and more plausible. Going second, not. It turns out just getting 2 bodies on the field is not as easy. And so this isn't, a starter in the traditional sense of the word, because obviously it depends on other cards. And it's not an extender either, because again, let's say I just have Debug and this in hand. Normal summon Debug, she gets impermed. This isn't really helping me push through that, unless I also have another extender on top of the Debug that just got negated. So you obviously run it for the combo, but running multiples, in my experience, isn't ideal, because like I said, it just doesn't help you push through interruptions when going second. Then we have the 3 copies of Firewall Defenser. I don't think I need to explain much other than this card and any discard is full combo. Also going second, sometimes it's better to summon Firewall Guardian rather than Phantom, because obviously Guardian equals more bodies, so you can push through more. But other than that, 1 card, 1.5 card full combo. Also, whatever you discard off of Phantom, you can grab it back with OG Firewall. It's quick effect to bounce cards from the grave. So if you started off your combo with Defenser into Phantom and had to discard, let's say, a Handtrap, you can just grab it back if you feel the need to. Armored Bitron. So I love this card. So this card is essentially just 3 more copies of Defenser, because it can distribute itself to summon any Cybers from the deck. It's just that it's negated. But what that means is that I'm basically playing 6 copies of Defenser, right? Because you tribute this, summon Defenser, and since Defenser activates Engraved, then it doesn't matter, right? Other times when this has come up, if you draw this plus, for example, Microcoder or a way to get to Microcoder, then you can instead tribute it and summon IBLEE, and then use IBLEE and Microcoder to go into Code Talker and start making plays. So that way you start off your combo imperm proof and Nibiru proof, and it's basically in a way 3 more copies of IBLEE. So that's pretty cool too. This can also summon Gatchiri for the same thing. So if you finish your combo and you summon this guy, you can summon Gatchiri and make something unaffected. So has a lot of utility. Now you do have to be wary, since it uses up your normal summon and it tributes for cost. If you get ashed, you're left with nothing on field. So sometimes if I have this plus, for example, one of the Mathmechs, either Addition or Subtraction, I'll normal summon this, use Subtraction effect to summon itself, and then tribute. So if this gets ashed, I still have a Cybers on field. Then we have 3 copies of Lady Debug. Basically, Debug plus any extender is also full combo. So, it's kind of self-explanatory in that way. I'm just maxing out on all the cards that full combo. And also, Lady Debug on her own, you'll see this in a combo. Her on her own is all 3 firewalls, the triple monster negate, OG firewall double bounce, and singularity triple bounce with the Savworm and Graveyard. So that's also nice. One thing you do have to keep in mind, and this is only exclusive to when you start off your plays with normal summoning Debug as opposed to Defenser or some random Cybers on field plus Microcoder in hand. So if you specifically start with Lady Debug, when you get to the part where you're gonna use Code Generator's effect to dump a monster, you actually can't dump Dot Scraper if you want to end on all the interruptions, because basically throughout the combo, there's 3 darks that you're trying to search, because you're trying to search Microcoder, trying to search IBLEE, and you're trying to search Phantom or Defenser, same thing, and they're both dark. So you're trying to get to those 3 darks. And if you normal summon Lady Debug, and obviously she's going to search Microcoder, that's 1. Codec is going to search you another one. So the 3rd one, you're not going to be able to get to her unless you do something specific. So what you do, again, only if you start off your plays with normal summon Debug, is that you dump that 3rd dark that you're going to be missing off of Code Generator. So if you normal summon her, she searches Microcoder, Code Generator can dump IBLEE, for example, and then Cynet Codec will search you Defenser. Or you can do it backwards. Code Generator dumps Defenser and Cynet Codec searches you IBLEE. So that way you're actually able to end on all the interruptions. So I am playing Aratama and Sakitama. So these cards, it was just an experiment because since this is a 60 card deck, mathematically speaking, I needed another +1 card. I needed another, didn't have to be a normal summon, but I just needed another card that generated advantage on its own. So even though this isn't a dedicated math deck because I'm not playing Super Factorial, which I'll explain at the end, I decided to put this in just to see how it went. And I absolutely love how this card plays. Because obviously this is a 1-card circular and circular does a lot. But also this plus a lot of other cards is full combo. Like for example, this plus Microcoder is full combo. Even this plus Lady Debug is full combo, funny enough. Because what you do is that this goes into circular. Then with circular and all the bodies circular gives you, you go for a cyber switch play, you search the ritual stuff, you tribute Lady Debug for the ritual monster, and then you revive Lady Debug with cyber switch. And then Lady Debug gets you the microcoder, microcoder gets you the codec, and you do the full combo. So Aratama's nice. Like in practice, Aratama's been really nice, so I decided to keep him. Just one, again, I'm not trying to max on him, I just need another +1 card. So that, you know, just for math reasons, so I would see good cards often enough. But I really like him. And also Sakitama, but I'll get to him later. Now, I feel like I should address this, but this deck does play 10 normal summons. This isn't a normal summon. But in my experience, it hasn't been an issue. In part because most of your normal summons, if they go uninterrupted, that's full combo anyways. So at least going first, it pretty much doesn't matter if you draw multiples. Secondly, because you have many ways to get normal summons on the field. So for example, you have Code Talker inverted, OG Firewall Dragon summoning from hand. You have this Avworm if you get to that point in the combo. Likewise, you can do the play I just mentioned earlier with Cyber Switch, where you can tribute off something for the ritual monster and then revive what you just tributed with Cyber Switch to get its effect. So there's many ways to get your normal summons onto the field if you draw multiples. And again, in my experience, it hasn't been an issue. And for the record, if you're curious, like I was, it's about a 25% chance to draw 2 or more normal summons when going second, which isn't a small number, but it also isn't a big number. You know, it still means that most of your duels, you're still not going to be drawing multiples. So like I said, at least for me, in my experience, it's been fine with the 10 normal summons. Also, that's why I run so many extenders and hand traps, so going second isn't as hard, even if, for example, I draw multiple normals. 3 microcoder, obviously him on his own doesn't do anything, but him plus 2 bodies is the full combo, and him plus 1 body still gets you a lot. He's just another copy of Codec, so you max on him. And then lastly, 3 Cynet Mining and 3 Small World for consistency. So now on to the extenders. Of course, we have the lone circular. I don't think it needs much explaining, but the main point of circular in this deck, other than the obvious that it gives you a bajillion bodies, is that it searches you a spell card, in this case, Equation, which guarantees that you can always trigger Cyber Switch, even if all 5 of your opening cards are monsters, you can still get to a spell card so you can trigger Cyber Switch. That's the main reason you play him, aside from him equaling a bajillion bodies. Parallel Exceed, so I'm playing 3 and not 2. Well, firstly, obviously you play Exceed for the combo as your win target, but also there's a couple of reasons for playing 3 and not 2. Number 1, this is a 60 card deck, so you do want to try to max out on your good cards, and this leads to Circular, which is a broken card, so obviously you want to draw it. But also a common thing that comes up is that this is one of your best small world bridges. So you'll oftentimes banish one. So even if you do, you still have 2 left in deck. There's a couple other reasons too. They're more technical. But yeah, 3 Exceed. Then we have 1, 2, 3 Subtraction, 3 Addition, and 1 Sakitama, which all 7 cards do exactly the same, although I'll talk about these ones first. Again, this is a 60 card deck. So the math on 60 cards isn't the same as the math on 40 cards. And when I say math, I don't mean this. I mean, you know, percentage and, you know, the chance to draw something. So it's not as bad to play, you know, all 6 copies of these, because it's still not that likely for you to draw multiples. And these cards, in addition with Sakitama, are one of your better extenders, because these 7 cards, I might as well count it too. these 7 cards do something very specific, which is that they can summon themselves even if you don't have monsters on field. Obviously, this assumes that your opponent has something and something that you can target. But still, that's very important because one of the biggest weaknesses of this deck, and many decks, at least many Cybers decks, is that if your normal summon gets Book of Moon or banished or just destroyed, you know, or Ghost Ogre, whatever, many of the Cybers extenders depend on you having a Cybers name already on the field to summon themselves out. And so these 6 plus this 1 card don't depend on you having anything on your field to summon themselves out. So that's why I maxed out on these cards specifically as opposed to other extenders. And obviously there's the additional fact that all of these are level 4, which get me to Alimbertion, which get me to Circular, and Circular is a bajillion pluses. So yeah. Also, I feel I should put this out there because it irks me when people say the contrary. But Subtraction is the better one because this thing actually baits things out when going second. And if it doesn't bait something out, then it just makes it easier for you to beat over stuff because, you know, you'll target a 3k body and bring it out to 2k. So yes, Subtraction is the better one. Then you have Sakitama. Actually, I want to point this out real quick. Sakitama has a real funny interaction with Subtraction and Addition because since this can summon itself out for free, you know, if you draw both, you use its effect to summon itself out, you target it with Subtraction or Addition, summon it out, make Alimbertion, and then you can start comboing without ever using your actual normal summon. That's come up and it's pretty funny. And I've thought about playing more of these, specifically even without increasing Aratama, just increasing Sakitama. But I don't know, that's still in theory land. Anyways, one other thing I want to mention, which is very funny and very niche, but it could come up, is that its last effect is mandatory. It says if discards tributed, target a spirit added to your hand. That includes itself. What that means is that if you tribute this for the ritual summon of Cyber's Sage, it'll actually mandatory activate to either add itself back or add back Aratama. So that's pretty funny. Only one Mathmech Ligma, so I would like to be able to play 2 of these, but it just doesn't come up. You know, this whole Circular for a follow-up turn doesn't come up because you either win in 1 turn or you get into a grind where Circular isn't really the deal breaker. You know, being able to use Circular on a follow-up turn if you grab it back. And the reality is it's just very awkward opening with him because you never actually want to summon him from the hand. You obviously want to summon him from grave because it's where it's free. So if you hard open this and you're forced to, you know, summon him out early from the hand, then it just makes your Circular play worse later on because again, you don't get that free body that you would have gotten from sending this guy to graveyard and summoning him back. So I just play the 1-of. If you draw him, it's obviously fine. You can just play your combo normally. Then Cogen, you need him as your Earth target for the combo. And sometimes if you have enough extenders in your hand, you can send something other than Dotscaper. So for example, Gatchiri is your other Earth target in case you already hard opened Generator. And if you're doing the combo and going first, for example, and you have enough extenders, then instead of sending Dotscaper with this guy, you can actually send Gatchiri. You grab him back with Firewall Dragon, effect to add back, or just with Splash Mage. And then you obviously summon him out so that you can make something unaffected for 2 turns. So that's pretty, you know, funny and a neat interaction. But yeah, Gatchiri's just there in case you hard draw Generator. So at least you don't have a missed search with Codec. And then these aren't extenders, obviously, but these are your honorary extenders. 3 Crossout, 1 Call By. Obviously, this just says Draw and Lockbird. This just says fuck Droll, fuck Shifter. So, yeah. Also, I might as well address this now. Regarding Draw and Lockbird, how do you play through Draw and Lockbird if you don't open one of these 4 cards? It's actually very simple in this deck. You don't. You play and you put down the deck and you pick up another deck if you want to actually play through Droll. That's the answer, right? So no, this deck does not play through Droll. But you know what? Got a quick story to tell y'all. So gather around, children. You see, I once had the opportunity to speak with a wise young man. He said, "Dear Drip, if my deck does not lose to Droll, then it's just not a good deck." That man then proceeded to get top 32 at a YCS the very next month, and a couple months afterwards, he got top 16 at 2023 NAWCQ Nats. So you know what? I'll take his word for it. I'll inhale a little bit of the copium and say, you know what? My deck is a good deck because it loses to Droll. And that's all the copium self BS I need to keep going. Anyways, then on to the hand traps. Now, I should point this out first. I'm mainly playing hand traps only for Crossout Dessignator. Because realistically, again, if you do your full combo, you don't need hand traps to help you win because your full Endboard alone basically wins the game. So if you're not playing Crossout Designator, then you could just choose to play hard go second cards instead. So yeah, that's up to you. But I'm playing triple Droll for Crossout, although obviously it's good. Triple Nib for Crossout. Double Ash for Crossout. Double Imperm for Crossout. Then one Veiler, one Ogre, and one Haunted Mansion. Everything for Crossout, although Mansion obviously also beats Bestials. I should point out that Ghost Ogre is losing popularity and Ghost Mourner is gaining popularity, so you might want to change that out. Or you know what? Just put whatever hand traps you feel like. Again, these are only here for Crossout, and it's mainly for these four, specifically these two. So yeah, everything else is, you know, personal preference. Then we have these. These are basically engine requirements, although these aren't as bad to draw. Like, if you draw them, it's fine. It really doesn't matter. But you play IBLEE because she's your win condition. Dotscaper for the combo to send it off gen. Guardian in case you draw Defensor plus Phantom, because you obviously can't summon Phantom from deck at that point. But if you play Guardian, then Defensor Phantom is still full combo. And also, I mentioned this earlier, but when you go second, sometimes it's better just to summon Guardian off of Defensor because it's more bodies and it helps push through more. And obviously Conflict for your Endboard. It's only ever bad if you draw it going second. Going first, it doesn't matter. And then, the moment we've all been waiting for, ladies and gentlefish. These 5 cards are the motherfucking reason I'm playing 60 goddamn cards in this deck. Because I do not want to draw any single, actually I don't care about these two. I do not want to draw these cards, and I especially don't want to draw these two because they are hard garnets in regards to Cyber's Witch, because obviously if you draw either of them you can't trigger Witch anymore, and that hurts so much. This, if you draw it, it's not the end of the world, but it's not good. Obviously this, if you draw it, it's one less free card, but you need it to make sure the IBLEE lock stays. And this, if you draw it, isn't that great because, like I said, I'm not playing super factorial, meaning that if I draw this, then I don't have a search with circular. So yeah, but it's fine. Well, drawing these two does mean that you can't use Cyber's Witch. These aren't actual garnets. And what I mean by that is that at least going first, you can still do the full combo, everything. Even if you draw either of these. Obviously, if you draw both, firstly, you should play a lottery. But second, if you draw both in 60, then it doesn't matter. You just use them, right? Ritual summon. So it's still not the end of the world if you draw either of them. You know, you play the hand you're dealt. But I'll explain later in the combo portion of the video. Also worth knowing that this has a grave effect to summon out 2 tokens, which means that when you play out your turn at the end, you can use Phantom's graveyard effect to put something back. Something you can consider putting back is Splash Mage, because Splash Mage is basically your best link 2 that you can make with the 2 tokens. So at least you have a little bit more of a guaranteed follow-up if your field somehow gets blown up, right? If your Endboard gets blown up. So yeah, good to know. So onto the X deck. Balinix for the combo, specifically for the IBLEE lock. Code Talker and Splash Mage, your link 2s, part of the combo. Transcode, you need it for the combo. Xcode, you need it for the combo because he gets to Exceed, and Exceed gets you to Circular. But also, Xcode is really cool because his zone blocking technique is actually very useful for some Endboards, and you'll see it in some of the combos where you extra link them, but one of your monsters in the EMCs points upward. So for example, just like Xcode, like you'll end with somebody up here pointing upwards, and so you block the zone above that, so that even though you're pointing to their field, they still can't summon there. So you still, you know, extra link them and taking away their ability to link summon. So that's really cool. Shout out, by the way, to the NW channel where I got that idea from in the first place. But you'll see that in the combos. OG Firewall Dragon for the combo. Although for those of you that like ultis, I also have this version. But funny enough, even though I do like how this one looks, I just like the secret more because it shines more, so it looks better when it's actually on the field. This one's kind of opaque, but the design is still pretty cool. So Firewall, both effects are needed for the combo, and it's also part of your Endboard. And I'm not gonna lie, I really like ending on, you know, all three Firewalls, this one, Singularity, and Dark Fluid. It just seems so anime-esque, and it seems so cool, so I really like that. Inverted, your light code talker, basically to search debug, so you need them for the combo in that regard. Protect code, your dark target, your main dark target, because you can obviously make code talker, but realistically you're going to be using protect code for that. And his graveyard effect is also nice because it helps you combo even harder. You know, it's basically 2 bodies for the price of 1. Alimberation, because Circular kind of busted and he's a billion bodies, and also you need him for Dark Fluid having counters and Singularity having bounces. Cyber Switch and the Zavworm, same reason as Alimberation, part of the combo. Also Cyber Switch summoning back from grave is very nice because she doesn't, whatever she summons isn't negated, so you know, very nice cards. Starlight rare, Firewall Dragon, Singularity. Absolutely love how this thing looks. It's actually my first Starlight. And hopefully my last, because my wallet. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, man, I absolutely love how this looks. And yeah, just part of your Endboard and just a really cool card overall. And also, you know, you need it for the extra link. And Dark Fluid. You technically don't need them for your Endboard, technically. It only ever comes up if people out the IBLEE lock, like they tribute her off or send her for cost for something. That's when this comes up going first. But going for second, it comes up all the time because since you're often locked into only one attack with Circular or because of Circular, then Dark Fluid plus Cyber Switch is basically this deck's version of Update Jammer. Because, right, this card will get 3 counters, so it goes up to 10.5k. And something that's come up is that if this card is being pointed at by Xcode or it's co-linked with transcode, then it will have an exact 11k, meaning that even if your opponent has something like an attack position Barone at 3000, right, this thing can still one punch over it. And if you factor in cards like Addition and Subtraction, then this thing will effectively have 13k attack, right? Because you take 1,000 and you give 1,000. So it's nice mainly for that reason. I've one punched people way too many times by making this when you go second. So it's really fun. It's a really cool card. And like I said earlier, I just really like being able to end on all 3 firewalls. It's very anime-esque. Then we have Lingeribo. So this card is one of the 2 flex spots, although this one is kind of a flex spot, kind of not. Thing with Lingeribo is that yes, it's completely replaceable, but because this card, and this card are my only 3 link monsters with downwards pointing arrows that do not point upwards, what happens is that if I take out Lingeribo, right, depending on what I put in as a replacement, I will only have these 2 guys as links with down pointing arrows, which means that if I'm gonna extra link somebody, these guys need to be the 2 monsters in my EMZ. So if I start my plays off with Almirage and then I link him off, I'm not gonna be able to extra link my opponent unless I do something like this, where I ended with a monster with an up pointing arrow, but then I block the zone with Xcode Talker, so that way my opponent is still effectively locked out of link summoning, right? Because he can't actually use this zone. So unless I do something like that, then I won't be able to extra link my opponent if I take out the Lingeribo. So he is cuttable. You can still extra link without him, but you got to keep in mind some combos might change depending on what you replace Lingeribo with. And the last card, and the only actual flex spot, is Access Code Talker. I don't think I need to explain what he does or why he's good. Being unresponsible still comes up, you know, that people can't respond to his effects. But yeah, you can counter him out if you feel something else is important. So now we're moving on to the combo half of the video. Now the first 3 combos are lines that I had already shown in my other video. although the second and the third combo here are going to be a little bit more polished and clean than the ones I showed in the other video. Although this one's going to be identical basically. So if you want to jump to any other of the combos, feel free to do so. I'm not going to be narrating any of them, mostly because I don't want this video to be any longer than it already is going to be. And also because I feel like everything's kind of self-explanatory. If you just look at what's being activated, it kind of explains itself. But if you have any questions as to what's happening or how anything, anything that wasn't clear, feel free to leave a comment. I always answer comments. So yeah, let's get to it. This one is the full board, starting off with Defenser. So Defenser plus any discard, full combo. Let's get it. This one is probably still my favorite combo. Basically, it's what to do if you draw Phantom, because you think this is a brick, but even when you draw him, you can still full combo. So I'm going to show how to do it with Defenser, although you could do the same thing if you had Debug or Microcoder plus a couple bodies. But yeah, Defenser plus Phantom, still full combo. Check it out. Real quick, so if you noticed earlier, I linked off Phantom and Splash Mage into Code Talker. Now, I could have hard made transcode at that point, and basically that way I wouldn't have to use Ligma's effect just yet, because right now I basically wasted a Ligma that I didn't have to use. But the thing is, if you make transcode without having codec on field, you basically lose out on two bodies, because you lose out on Code Generator and you lose out on Dot Scraper summoning himself back. So even though I gave up Sigma, even though I didn't have to, by doing the play the way I did, which is by going to Code Talker first and then making this guy, once I already have codec on field, by doing it that way, I end up with more bodies overall at the end. So that's why I did it that way. So this is Lady Debug plus any extender. This is also the full combo, although this combo is the only one that uses a different line than all the rest, because all the other combos follow a pretty similar line. This one's the only one that kind of deviates. If you had more than one extender, so for example, if you had Debug and two extenders, then you could do basically the same line that all the combos go for. But again, this is the most, assuming you get hand trapped, or assuming that this is the only, plays you have, like Debug plus one extender, then this is the way to do it. So this next one's gonna be what to do when you draw Defensor plus the Ritual Monster, and in the next one you'll see what to do with Defensor plus the Ritual Spell. The question I had when tackling this is, you know, whether or not you actually want to Ritual summon the monster out, or whether or not you basically just ignore it and just make your whole combo without the Ritual Monster. But like I said earlier, you basically lose out on 3 bodies if you don't Ritual summon this. Because you lose out on the Ritual Monster, you lose out on the Fusion Monster body, and you lose out on what the Fusion Monster was going to summon from hand, and you lose out on what Cyber's Witch was going to summon out from Graveyard. So actually it's more like 4 bodies almost that you're losing out on, and it actually makes comboing harder, at least when going first. So you'll see, but basically what you do is that you use Microcoder or Phantom to search the Ritual spell. So check it out. So as you can see, this is one of the combos where you do the cool technique where you have extra link them, but you're pointing upwards with Dark Fluid, so you still need to block this zone with Xcode Talker so that they can't actually summon a link there. So that way they can't get rid of IBLEE. Now this combo is more or less the same idea, except this time we've drawn Cynet Ritual. Now this time we are going to need to discard a card because unlike the other one, we can't discard Cynet Ritual and add it back. And this is going to basically end on everything except for the counter trap. Now I do want to point out, and let me pause it right here. Right now we just dumped Dotscaper with Gen, but if we had any other extender at all, we could have instead dumped either IBLEE or Cyber Sage, the Ritual Monster, which we'll obviously then grab back later with Firewall. And if we do that, then we could actually end on the counter trap. So there is a way to end on the counter trap in this version if you have enough extender, if you have at least one more extender. But since I'm, you know, showing you like the bare minimum combo, right, the bare minimum cards required, then we're gonna do it without any extenders, and in this case we are gonna end without the counter trap. Also, even though I'm showing this with Defensor, obviously you can do a similar thing with Debug or Microcoder. It's just that those cards require extenders in addition to drawing them, right? You know, Debug plus an extender or Microcoder plus at least 2 more bodies, whereas Defensor alone can do the whole shebang. But you know, still there's multiple ways to do it. Now in this combo, I'm going to show you basically what you can do with 2 level 4s on field. And the reason I'm going to do it like that is because most of the extenders in this deck are level 4. So this is going to come up very often. Not necessarily that you just draw a bunch of level 4s, but let's say you draw Debug, you normal summon her, she gets impermed, and then you have like a level 4 extender like a Mathmech, then you can go into this sort of line. So this isn't going to be full combo, but this is still 4 to 6 interruptions depending on how you want to count. And also this is a combo that you do if you hard open Aratama and nothing else, because again Aratama is just 2 level 4s on field. So we end on a double bounce Firewall, a triple bounce Singularity, a triple negate Dark Fluid, and we have the Savworm in Graveyard. So again, that's 4 to 6 interruptions depending on how you want to count, and you still have 3 cards left over in your hand. So if you did open Handtraps in addition to this, then that's of course going to help your end board overall. Now this combo is a little bit weird in that if you had open Debug plus absolutely any extender, then you wouldn't be going for this line. You basically try to go for the full extra link combo, because this isn't going to be an extra link board. And what that means is that if your only play actually is Debug and you're trying to go for this line, then more than likely you will be hand trapped at some point. So actually doing this whole combo is unlikely if your only play was Debug, because again you'll probably get interrupted. But I still want to show off this combo for 2 reasons. Number 1, you could have opened multiple play starters, and due to getting like ashed and impermed, you could end up having to go for a line like this. That's number 1. The other thing I like about this combo is that It shows you different lines as to how your cards interact and, you know, how your deck interacts. And it basically is another way to show how to build a board without the need for codec. So yeah, that's why I like this combo, and that's why I wanted to show it off. It's not so much that you need to memorize it, but just get the idea behind it. Alright, so this next one's a pretty funny one. It's basically the full combo through Nibiru. The way you do it is that you make an alembition with diameter as a material, so it has an omni negate for the turn in under 5 summons, right? And that way, if they try to nib you, you just negate it. So I'm actually not playing diameter in my list, as you saw, but I still wanted to show this off because I thought, firstly, that it was a good combo, because it is. It's basically circular, any of the Mathmechs that summon themselves out for free, including Sigma, and any discard. So it's something that you could run. The only thing that you have to do extra is add a copy of diameter to the deck. The reason I'm personally not running it is because even though I did use it and it worked well at sometimes, many times, even when I did have the option to go for it, you know, I drew circular plus Mathmech, I would purposely not go for this line, because even though it plays around Nibiru, it plays into a lot of hand traps much harder, because you're dumping diameter off of circular instead of dumping Sigma, which means that if you don't get the circular effect to search the spell card, and circular is again a card that people will often negate, if you don't get to resolve that effect to search equation, then you basically lost out on a body you would have had. Because if you had dumped Ligma, then you would have had an extra body, but because you dumped diameter, you don't have that extra body. So you play around Nibiru, but you play harder into other interruptions. And I found myself not going for the diameter line so much that I eventually just cut it out. And I basically just said to myself, you know what? If they have it, they have it. And I'm going to point this out. If you actually play this line, this deck has about a 50% chance, maybe like a little more, 51, 52, that any given hand in this 60 card deck is full combo through Nibiru. So basically, every single time you start, you'd have about a 50-50 chance that you could full combo through Nibiru. And if you're wondering where I got those numbers, you know, that percentage, I basically
made it the fuck up.
No, I'm kidding. I calced it, but I'm not going to get into that because it's so technical. But just to make sure I wasn't off, I actually played out 50 different test hands in Edo Pro just to see if I'm actually good at calcing percentages or not. And actually 27 of the 50 hands, which is about 54%, were indeed able to play through Nibiru. And if you're wondering how, about 20% of those is drawing away to full combo plus crossout. And then it's about a 30% chance to draw a combination of cards which will either get you to circular plus a Mathmech, which is again full combo through Nib, or which will get you to microcoder and IBLEE on field as your starting play. Because obviously you normal summon IBLEE, link it and microcoder into Code Talker, and you're Nibiru and imprint proof. And remember, even though circular is a 1, you play 3 Cynet Mining and you play 3 Small Worlds, so really it's like having 7 copies of circular. So it's actually not that unlikely to come up. But anyways, without getting any more technical than I already have, it's like a 50% chance. So yeah, take that as you will. So something I want to talk about is the topic of how to play through hand traps. And I wanted to try to be comprehensive about that on this video. But the thing is, without showing you actual duels, which unfortunately I'm not going to be doing for this video, but without showing you actual duels it's a little hard to actually talk about hand traps because there's so many variables. Obviously, there's a variable of what hand trap it is. There's a variable of where they hand trap you, because this deck plays into basically every single hand trap, and there's so many points of interaction. And the thing is, because this isn't a meta deck in the sense that, you know, it's not, and especially not this build, people don't know what to do against this. Like the first time people see this deck, they do not have any idea of where to hand trap you. So they'll just hand trap you at random points because they don't know what you're going to do. And so every time it changes. But there's also other variables like, did you hard open a spell card or not? Like Crossout, Small World, Cynet Mining, etc. because if you hard open those cards, then sometimes you can actually go for an early Cyber Switch play, although that mostly comes out when you're going second, but still, you can go for an early Cyber Switch play without needing to go through the Mathmech cards. And speaking of which, you know, it also is going to depend on whether you drew multiple level 4s or not, because if you drew multiple level 4s, sometimes you can push through hand traps by just making an Alimbertion after they hand trap you and then going for a circular play. So it really depends a lot on each hand, and honestly the best thing I can do to you is just tell you to play the deck, right? Just play many games and eventually you'll start figuring out how to play around certain things. So that's basically the video. Couple last things to note on the deck. This build and this deck is better at going against board breakers than it is against hand traps, because 2, sometimes even 1 hand trap can stop your turn depending on how you opened, whereas even 3 board breakers probably can't clear your board once you've done the whole shebang. And also IBLEE stopping cards like Lightning Storm evenly, kaijus, which is something very common that I hear from people. They're like, oh damn, I had a kaiju or a lava golem in my hand but I couldn't use it. Helps, right, in being able to not get your board blown out. Also, another thing, even though I would like to have more hand traps or going second cards to actually help me go second, right, because again, I'm only playing 13, but in 60 cards, the math on 13 cards isn't really that good. But in practice, I've just found it better, in my opinion, to have extenders than it is to have hand traps, which is why I have so many, and I like maxed out on all the Mathmechs. Because A, it obviously helps you play through interruptions, and B, I honestly just find it more fun to play through interruptions with extenders rather than be in this game of, okay, you hand trap me, I hand trap you, you hand trap me, I hand trap you back, or with board breakers, same thing. Honestly, I just find it more fun to try to push with extenders in this deck. And, you know, if I lose, I lose, it's whatever. But I honestly just, you know, if I were to fit something else, I would still probably try to fit in more extenders than hand traps. Just because that's just the way I like playing this deck specifically. Also, a key thing to keep in mind, and I don't know if I should have said this before starting the combo portion, but basically every single combo can be done in a different order, like the ones I showed, meaning that you don't have to necessarily memorize everything exactly as I did. And specifically the ending, like the last 5 steps in any combo, can all like be rearranged and you end on the same thing. So, you know, what's actually important is that you understand why you're doing something and what you're trying to accomplish. Like, for example, again, I've said this a couple times, you're trying to get to 3 different darks in your combo: IBLEE, Microcoder, and Phantom, which is accessed via Defensor. So that's one key thing you keep in mind. Also, you always want to get to Circular, because Circular gives you a bunch of bodies in addition to the spell card for Witch. So as long as you keep, and obviously you want to get to Codec at some point. So as long as you understand the key things you're trying to accomplish, you know, the order doesn't really matter that much, and you don't necessarily have to memorize everything. Like I said at the beginning, basically 80% of your hands will get you to the full combo. The ones that don't, you can just go for a triple Firewall board, you know, Singularity, Dark Fluid, and OG Firewall with the Fusion and Graveyard, so you're still fine. Also, if there's a card in my list that I'm not running that you think should be running this kind of deck, there's a good chance I've tested it out. So if you're curious as to why I'm not running it, you can just leave a comment. Also, finally, I'm going to address this, why I'm not playing Super Factorial. It's because this isn't a Mathmech deck. This was always supposed to be a Code Talker deck. You know, if I really wanted to play Mathmech, I wouldn't be doing all of this stuff. I would literally cut all the Code Talker stuff and I just play pure Mathmech, which is probably a better deck. But I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh to play good decks. I play Yu-Gi-Oh to have fun, and I have fucking fun with this. And I just find what's his name, the 3 material Mathmech guy, I find him so boring as an interruption. I get he's good, I get it, he's a negate and he rips 3 cards. I know he's good, and it helps play through hand traps if you search Super Factorial as your first search. I get all that. I just find it boring, and that's just not the kind of deck I want to play. That's why I'm not playing Super Factorial. Likewise, I'm aware of the arguments against Cyber Switch, at least some of them, and more so the Ritual package because it is a brick, but it's just too much fun playing them. And like I said earlier, one-punching people with Dark Fluid at 10k, 11k, 12k attack It's just so funny, man. Or sis. It's just so funny, right? It just never gets old. So, you know, it's just a preference thing. Anyways, that's it. If you have any questions or even suggestions, leave a comment. I always answer. Almost always. And Drip TCG out. Peace. Take care.
One more thing.
So if you've seen any of my other videos and you've had a attentive eye, you might have noticed that I always use a band card as a field center. So Astrograph, thank God it got unbanned. Electromite, come back to us, please. I'm not gonna say what the other one was, but if you're a person of culture, you'll know what it is. And for this video, I chose to use Air Neos. Obviously, our boy's not banned, thankfully. But you know, Konami wants us to think it doesn't exist, so it's almost like being banned. He's basically banned from being reprinted and mentioned and even acknowledged. So yeah, that's why I chose to use him for the field center for this video. And also because I think it looks absolutely amazing. Anyways, peace out.